Will Smith versus Chris Rock, right to defend your wife versus the right to comedy. Men versus women, black people versus white people, leveraging in publicity. Back to right to defend your wife and chivalry versus comedy, which is built on poking fun at truths that are known but not spoken out of social nicety. Comedy builds thick skin by exploiting this fact, and I mean exploiting not in a negative way. I should say that comedy employs this fact. It takes things that people think but might not be comfortable saying and articulates them in a way that is funny. That's where the classic format known as a roast comes from. That's a perfect example of this. Chris Rock's joke was about films. His joke really wasn't an attack on her. If anything, I'll get into that. But I don't think any party saw it that way to begin with. This isn't about chivalry, really, even, as she wasn't really being attacked. I mean, it is about chivalry. It's about a display of chivalry, and I'll get into that. But everyone was all smiles until that pivotal eye roll moment. To me, there was more going on in that few frames, in that few seconds, than the entire debacle, the entire affair, the entire event. G.I. Jane, he's saying, what did he say? I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see you. He's talking about, he said, Jada, love you. That is positive racial variety in films, black women getting roles, G.I. Jane being a film that was made about a female protagonist being a hero in spite of being ensconced in a primarily male peer group, or basically being a female in the military when it was a little less heard of, and definitely hadn't been fetishized in film yet. I remember thinking that G.I. Jane was like the original Lara Croft or something. I remember likening G.I. Jane, sorry, not the original, time-wise, I guess, but likening G.I. Jane to Lara Croft. I thought she was a badass, and I'm sure men thought she was full of sex appeal. This is not about race. This is not about chivalry. This is not about gender. This isn't about any binary factions or binary viewpoints. No, not to me. This is clearly about two people and the tragic dynamic between them. That because of the current state of propagated culture is villainizing either Will Smith, mostly Will Smith, or Chris Rock, or it's looking at both of their two viewpoints and not looking at Jada at all. She's hiding. She's sitting there, supposedly poised and virtuous and looking down on whoever, with her eye roll and her continued silence around the subject. But she is doing barbaric damage, pulling the strings behind the scenes here. This has been, and unfortunately will be, going on for quite some time now if people don't take a look at this and stand up for Will Smith. Steven Pinker from Harvard has made a lot of content, speeches, essays about the difference between common knowledge and shared knowledge and how it affects people's reaction to situations. That is an important factor to look at here. There's the question of shared knowledge, whether or not Chris Rock knew that she had alopecia, whether or not the public knew, and whether or not, with common knowledge, the public knew that Chris Rock knew, and whether or not he knew that the public knew. We don't even know that he knew that she had alopecia, or that he knew if the public knew, or if the public knew until now, or knew that he knew. Yet it was very real for Will Smith in that moment because in Jada's theatrical subtleties, they're very intentional. In the theatrical subtlety of her eye roll, she was making it clear that in her proposed reality, the one which she was going to later hold her husband accountable to, the public knew about her alopecia, and therefore that kind of calls for him to, it's a call to action for him in the subtlety, in the dynamics of their relationship. A reality which she was going to later hold him accountable to. The public knew about her alopecia in her sort of gaslit reality. It was Jada's eye roll that sent him flying. Imagine how she is at home. She's an out-of-control woman. She was smiling when he was up there crying and apologizing. She obviously longs to emasculate him, and he's using him to promote herself. She is now hiding behind him when clearly her being just a horrible wife was the cause for this. He was jumping forth to get out of her reaction, clearly. People are making too big a deal out of his actions without looking at the underlying causes. She got him banned from the academy, bottom line. I'm aware that there are other narratives that only look at things through a narrow lens. These dynamics are horrible. and they're tearing, our values apart at the seams, creating these like men that hate men and men that hate women and women that hate men. And it's reactive. Psychologist Jordan Peterson has discussed men and the fact that their conversations are sort of tempered and controlled and kept civil because there's an underlying threat of violence. They're allowed to punch each other in the face if something horrible or rude is said. Um, it's almost as if Jada was in the conversation here, but silently, subtly. She knows how to control and emasculate her husband without violence, and probably uses the fact that he can and won't react the way that he probably feels on a primal level, that he won't react like that against him or turns it on him. She's already, attempted to emasculate him publicly, and I'm sure that he saw in his mind's eye, or what I mean to say is foresaw, her future just mudslinging, talking badly about him on Oprah like she had done, attacking his sexuality, his masculinity, his manhood on Oprah or what have you. And she knew, and he knew he had to do something in public because otherwise she was going to take what happened, spin her own messed up narrative, and attempt to make herself look like a victim. Or like her relationship was so horrible because she can justify in her own mind her own transgressions, her own infidelities, which she calls entanglements. I'll get to that more later. But meanwhile, every bit of class and a lot of her fame and money comes from him and exploiting their relationship. She was in some music and some movies a while back, but I feel like, wouldn't be relevant anymore without him. She's literally sucking that out of him, though, like at his expense. He dotes on her and tries to be a husband to an impossible, emasculating woman that likely shames him and his sexuality and all of the aspects of who he is, which, so you know, Will Smith is an amazing actor and has made some beautiful points. Let him have his one mistake in his whole career without being kicked out of the entire academy. While he's obviously in a crisis situation of a relationship, along with every other thing that she's ripped out from under him or subtly taken control of just by being a vile woman and a vile wife. Men, like I said, have the underlying threat of violence. Out of control women don't have that. They say whatever they want to, knowing that most likely they won't be physically harmed. So pretty much they can block out any consequence. And he loves her. He really hasn't gone out. He's looking out for his family. Like, bottom line, he doesn't want any further public embarrassment, and really he shouldn't be put in a position to have to defend his sexuality and defend his personal details around his sex life. Really, it was just trash of her to share, which, if you don't know, she did. Chris Rock isn't known, like I said, for fighting people. I don't think that the fact is Will Smith probably knows. I don't think that he was hitting him to hit him or to actually harm him, or because he would have normally reacted that way. It was for show. It was for Jada, so she couldn't go and emasculate him and attack his manhood even further later on and say that he didn't jump to her defense and that that's an ongoing thing and all of the things that a lot of times women do when they're manipulative. She did this knowing exactly what she was doing, in my opinion. Knowing that an eye roll means one thing to the public and another thing entirely within her relationship and its intricacies. She is going to let this whole thing go to being further racially charged, gender charged, blaming him, just further charged in general. And people saying that, Will Smith is making black people look bad. If you don't know, there were a lot of people boycotting it, or there was the Oscar so what thing, and in the past and stuff. And this was the first all black uh, panel of producers that Will Smith was leading. That's what this year was for the Oscars. Do you think he would have messed that up on purpose? Do you think he would have, people are going to go and say that this further stereotypes. Do you think that, I mean, he's a smart guy. Do you think he would have asked for any of this or wanted any of this to happen? No. this is what's going on here. Between the lines, behind the scenes, punching him on stage was impulsive. It was sort of an eye for an eye, humiliation, but from Jada's point of view, that was almost acting as an agent for her, an extension of her, because she's got him by some messed up succubus puppet strings. He slapped him and turned away knowing he wouldn't hit back. It was, so, clearly he knows that, and it's out of character for him to just, to be a bully. He's a very mild-mannered, nice guy himself. And so, and he's attacking someone who's probably his friend. I don't think he would have made that joke if they weren't friends. So I don't think it was meant to be an attack so much of it as it was, theatrics enough to please her and let her know that she, could sit there satisfied knowing she had control over him. And, just leave it to her to ruin his big eventful night, his opportunity. That was a huge night in his life, and it's just another thing now that he's given to her. And once you invest in something so much, it feels like you have to make it work. I'm sure that's how he feels, but I can't know for sure, He was laughing at first. He was laughing at first, and that eye roll sent him a clamoring to fix it, to do what she wanted. He's trying so hard to show his love, to prove his love to someone who knows full well that he loves her. And she's not someone who deals in love. She's someone who laughs at love, who mocks love. He's in a relationship where she's manipulating his actions. He was afraid of her reaction when they got home, perhaps. She has said, that she was wearing her hair boldly, has announced that she loves it, and perhaps that's something she's saying as an affirmation, as she trains herself to love it. But again, it's like she obviously has super, inflated ego and low self-esteem, and she's making him run in circles around her, trying to feed a black hole that's never going to be full. She told Oprah that he F's her like a girl, that she doesn't love him, and has said that she wants him to be like Tupac. Will Smith has his own swagger. He doesn't need to be like Tupac. And possibly she has low self-esteem, so she wants to be treated like a side chick or something. And she needs validation sexually from multiple partners, from all the partners. So, yes, it would be difficult once you're sort of trapped in loving someone like that. They're just using you as sort of something to fuel their own ability to move about the world in that way. But I can understand, just in this context, how the whole men going their own way thing goes at its roots, even though, it kind of goes and produces walls on both ends. Just like, the feminist thing does. The man-hating feminism, that brand of it. And the whole red pill thing makes sense at its roots, just not where people have taken it. And even, regrettably, the whole incel thing, which is hard to swallow. But, it makes sense. I understand sort of the soup that it grew out of. It's just this cultural petri dish full of smut. Women can be evil. They can play the victim and use their womanhood to leverage things against their male partners. And the word entanglement is something that Jada Pinkett Smith has used, and it's another thing that I want to reference. It's just, I don't know, I'll talk about that in a minute. But the guy is calling out Will and saying that this is about his masculinity and calling him a quote unquote nice guy, with nice guy having a negative connotation. A lot of times because they believe that, that all women are evil. I think all broads are frauds is one of the sayings in a lot of those circles, which I can understand why they feel that way, unfortunately, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, and it's sad. Um, but I can't really fault them for feeling that way. After you get hit with something enough times, your subconscious starts to believe it, and so for them to build a belief system around it, things that have happened to them, like the brain really can't tell the difference between the past and the present once it's experienced something enough times. So it's sort of built their reality. For them to build a belief system around it makes complete sense. They're sort of defaulting to that to protect themselves. They're creating, a sort of, they're turning their reaction to it into a science so that they won't be hurt in the future, is what they're fine tuning it. But yeah, the whole nice guy thing with having a negative connotation, they're doing their part along with the evil females in the big picture to chip away at family values and what's left of the thriving infrastructure and happy families that those values and principles originally built. There's nothing wrong with believing in love and monogamy. You just have to be careful in today's world because there's people that will take that and that will use it for fraudulent purposes. And I'm not trying to say, I'm going to get attacked for this, and people are going to say that I'm, being a pick me, or, that I'm promoting misogyny, or no, there's a reason that those things exist too. This is not in a vacuum. I'm not trying to say that I'm not like other girls, or I'm not like, but I am. I'm not like those girls. I'm not like those succubi. There's a context, there's an aesthetic, there's a reason that they are the way they are. There's some sort of context that they grew up like that. They were formed to be that way, and I wasn't. They want to destroy men. It's disgusting to me. I'm not doing this for male approval. I'm saying this because I grew up with brothers and watched them go through this with evil girlfriends as they navigated the dating pool. I'm saying this because I love my brothers and my father and my grandfathers and my uncles and my cousins and my boyfriend. Will Smith has thrown his heart into this, and if you watch videos, it's tragic. It's heartbreaking. There's specific interviews that are going to be used a lot during this time where people are discussing this, and he's learned to laugh when he wants to cry because she literally laughs at things that are sacred to most people. It's evil. It just looks evil. It just makes your stomach turn. And I hate the term simp. I don't hate it in itself. I don't negate it. I don't think it's not there for a reason. I hate that it exists because I hate that it has to exist. I hate that a lot of women have created this climate, and men too, but we're women really, because this situation where men have to guard themselves against women like this, and in turn, they internalize it. They themselves decide to become players or join these groups because they believe they're dealing with women as a whole, you know, uh, as an entire gender that are going to do the exact same thing to them. So it's just about who throws the first punch, so to speak. And of course, they're like people are going to side with their gender if they are in a, binary gender group. And again, so I was saying I was going to talk about the word entanglement that Jada uses to describe her affairs and maybe even her relationships. The situation Will is in. She's describing it because that's the way she views relationships because she that's what she creates. That's the situation Will is in. That Will is in, not her. He's literally entangled in her puppet strings. She's got all of, sacred things, his emotions in her hands, and he needs to get them back from her so he can walk away whole. And a lot of women think that relationships will render them some sort of puppet because that is what they attempt to do to men. There are other reasons that people use the word entanglement, but in this case, I've seen things that are entanglements for other reasons, but we're talking about emotions. She's talking about her affair. She's using a euphemism for it.
but they think that relationships will render them some sort of puppet because that is what they attempt to do to men. And so, how can they be relationships any other way? You know? The term narcissism is thrown around a lot too, but viewing everyone else's worldview as being the same as your worldview, um, you know, predators viewing everyone as predators or viewing them as prey. But once again, back to Steven Pinker, there's an article about this somewhere too. By not using the word affair or the word cheating, she gets to hide her complete lack of virtue with regard to relationships and sex. He talks about indirect speech, is really what I meant to, why I was referencing him. But she's using indirect speech. It's a euphemism. She doesn't have to subconsciously herself be exposed to the kind of verbiage that would really cause her to expose to herself her own transgression in its full weight. She's able to avoid really looking at it and therefore, to acknowledging it. And therefore, the indirect speech and the euphemism in this case drives her to be able to go on justifying and living with her own wrongdoing. It emboldens her.
If you take a look at her reaction initially to the joke, she is laughing at it at first too, then turns and sees that he is also laughing, and rolls her eyes dramatically, almost as if he was not allowed to laugh also, treating him like he was some kind of child misbehaving, as if she expected him to react another way. Yet she's allowed to laugh and save face, whether or not she thought it was funny. She's a literal man-eater, in my book. The scariest type of woman, and the type that could bring any man to his knees because she's fiercely manipulative. I don't mean that in a good way, ladies. There were other emotions running high here as well. Chris Rock made a joke about Jada when he spoke at the Oscars in 2016 as well. There could be underlying dynamics going on there as well. To make a joke about someone's wife is one thing. To make a joke twice is another, and to make it without addressing the husband at all could be a sign of disrespect toward Will Smith, not to mention whatever is driving that behavior for Chris Rock. To not include him in the conversation at all is just kind of a disacknowledgement and a negating his presence. I would like to think that it is innocent, however, or was innocent, were it not for Jada Pinkett's hold over the entire situation and spinning it in a way that pulls Will into something he doesn't or want or need to be in order to keep his wife. She has him, as they have said in interviews, in this silly pact with a secret handshake-like slogan regarding their marriage, because he told her in the beginning that he would, quote, love her through anything, and it says ride or die through everything, something like that, and then bad marriage for life, literally. Bad marriage for life, 25 years and counting. That is the length of a life sentence. And when Will says this with her, she has this sadistic smile on her face, and he says it with the tone and mannerism of a dejected prisoner, just trying to love someone nobly who doesn't deserve a billionth of an ounce of that love, and who basically just throws that love in the dirt, even though it can't be thrown in the dirt. No one can take away the fact that Will has loved her the right way, and his side of the street is clean. He has loved her for so long and doesn't want to give up, because perhaps there's a side to her that isn't wicked and vile, a side to her that he knows, perhaps that only he knows. But it's not worth that kind of entrapment. They raise children together, and that is wonderful. It's time for him to move on, before she sucks his very soul out of him. You can tell he's in pain, and it's really tragic to watch him laugh when he wants to cry. You can see this very clearly in videos, and hold it together for the cameras better than any man in the history of men in his situation have. It's saddening. It makes you wonder what all he has gone through, while simultaneously gaining a general knowing of just what kind of atrocities he has had to walk through. Chained helplessly to this woman. I can relate. I don't love someone to control them. But it is not controlling to expect basic respect from your significant other. He has, it seems, had to alter all of his feelings and beliefs around love and marriage to fit her, quote, lifestyle. And it's clear they've gone as far as to do, like, strange tantric yoga, the westernized, hypersexualized version of tantric yoga, And they even credit the teacher with saving their marriage. So they've had to go all sorts of directions. They wrote a book. They're going to great lengths, to deny the truth or to save face and to redefine the parameters with which they would be holding to their values or his values. Very new age out there stuff. When you live in Hollywood and you have to save face for the camera constantly, there is no time for crisis. So I imagine, at least outwardly, he has to find outlets to convince himself, or at least to appear convinced, that he accepts his situation and readily and at face value, and that he's totally cool with it, to keep from any further humiliation in her name. He has to find outlets to convince himself, or at least to appear convinced. He has to find outlets to convince himself, or at least to appear convinced, that he accepts his situation readily and at face value, and that he's totally cool with it, to keep from any further humiliation in her name.